Let me start this devlog with a horrifying tale about the dangers of game development. Pretty much since the beginning of this project, every time I click on play or have the audacity to change scripts, Unity basically rolls a d6. If that roll is lower than 4, the following scene plays out.
Yes! This is not good.
Forward shield has failed.
Alright. Fire!
This crashing truly feels random. I know it's triggered by an assembly reload, at least according to the logs, but it's not consistent at all. Usually the first time switching to play mode goes well, usually not always, and the second time however it will most likely crash, or not. If it doesn't, then the chances are good it will remain stable for a little while. I've never experienced such a thing before in all my time working with Unity, VR or not. I've tried everything to fix it. I reinstalled Unity, I moved the project files to a different hard drive, I checked the Steam VR files, I deleted the library folder multiple times, I applied holy oil to the machine and recited the canticle of stability, but nothing worked. I've tried searching on the internet for a fix, but that is really hard when all your search terms are basically Unity, VR, crash on play. Eventually I did manage to find one bug report vaguely similar to my issue. It advised to delete the object folders, so I tried doing that, and you know what? It worked! Until it stopped working on the next day. Being a programmer and all, the next obvious thing to do was to capture a crash dump from Unity to maybe get a hint of what was going wrong. So I attached procdump to the process and now face the exact opposite problem. I couldn't get Unity to crash. Why? Is this a win? Did I win? Don't do game development, kids. While all this madness was going on, I actually did manage to make some progress. As promised in my last devlog, this one is all about implementing items. First thing I did was to write an importer for item-specific information like name and stack count. After that was done, it became time to make the items interactable. The SteamVR plugin I use comes with some handy pre-made components for throwable things. After attaching the right components to the items, they were ready to be picked up and thrown. That was easy, but I'm sure I'm gonna regret using someone else's framework in the future. Next task was to implement an inventory to store items in. It should have the same gameplay consequences as the SystemShock2 inventory while being more suited for VR gameplay in its design. SystemShock2's inventory is a 15x3 grid in which items can take up one or multiple cells. Items can be rearranged to make room for new ones, and the total capacity of the inventory is limited by the player character strength. So what are the gameplay consequences of such an inventory? For one, the fixed size grid limits the amount of items a player can carry at a time. Some items occupy more cells than others, which balances an item's usefulness against its inventory requirements. For example, guns in SystemShock2 take up a lot of inventory space, which punishes the player for carrying too many of them. You know which other inventory system also has these consequences? Skyrim's. Skyrim's inventory is essentially a list with a weight limit. Different items have different weights, thus balancing an item's usefulness against its inventory requirements. Imagine SystemShock2 but with Skyrim's inventory. It would have a weight limit of 45 instead of 45 grid cells, and every item would be assigned a weight equal to the amount of cells it occupied. SystemShock2 would play largely the same with this inventory. The main difference is that Skyrim's item list self-sorts, while SystemShock2 allows the player to sort and arrange his inventory manually. The main benefit of SystemShock2's inventory over Skyrim's is the ease of finding the items you are looking for. It is a little harder to find an item on a list than it is to find it on a grid. For VR, I imagined it to be a hassle to manually sort items in a grid inventory. Hence my first design was based on Skyrim's inventory. My initial design had 4 panels, Those panels display different item types sorted automatically. One panel for weapons, one for ammo, one for consumables and one for all the other items. The player can add items to this inventory until the weight limit is reached. I like this design and I think it's pretty cool, but there's one big problem with it. This design is way too big. The plan was to have it spawn around the player when switched on, but in the mostly tight corridors found in SystemShock2 it would constantly clip through walls. So I had to scratch this design and make a new one. In the new design there's only one inventory panel, and instead of spawning it in front of the player has to actively position it against the wall. It cannot be placed where parts of it would be obstructed. This allowing the panel to be placed in mid-air is an additional constraint when compared to the base game where you can open the inventory at any time. I hope that this constraint leads to interesting gameplay scenarios, but only time will tell. It definitely looks better on a wall compared to it just floating around somewhere. Now with the new inventory design, it's kinda odd that all items are shrunken to the same size. In the old design, different panels would scale their items differently, so it made sense, but now? Thinking about it, with this design it would be cool if one could place the items like in SystemShock2. With this we basically arrived back at copying SystemShock2's inventory design, and all this thinking about streamlining the inventory was kinda pointless. I'm probably just gonna implement it exactly the way it is in the original game. So having spent too much time on the inventory, both in this video and in real life, let's leave it how it is now and move on. Storing items in the inventory was thankfully a straightforward task. Like in almost every VR game with inventory, I added a backpack on the back of the player to drop items into. That was a real no-brainer. Now there's only one problem left when it comes to collecting items. How can players comfortably grab items outside of their reach? Outside of reach in VR also includes the player's feet, because no one wants to bend down in VR. Over the weekend the magic of friendship happened and I was invited to a party. Besides drinking and playing poker, the guy hosting also allowed us to play with his Valve Index VR headset. And I got a chance to play some Half-Life Alyx for the very first time. I discovered that Alyx has the best implementation of grabbing distant objects I've ever seen. You basically aim at the object you want, close your hand and do a flip of the wrist. The object in question then comes flying towards you and you either catch it or fail to do so. It's a really fun mechanic which I decided this game needs as well. First up, to implement my own version was to add a highlight to the object the player is pointing at. I wrote a neat little Fresnel shader for that and realized that all my object normals were screwed up. The issue is caused by this little line of code. Okay, by show of hands, who here knew that normals can't just be transformed by the same matrix used to transform vertices? That the matrix for vertices first needs to be inverted and then transposed. Well yeah, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. After fixing that, the shader worked correctly and I tackled the next step. Making the selected object fly towards the player at the flip of the wrist. I didn't really know how to do that though. In Alyx, objects fly towards the player in a nice arc with just the right amount of speed, which probably took a lot of tweaking I imagine. And running low on time, I decided to kiss and just make objects fly at the player in a straight line. Weirdly, now it looks exactly like the Psy skill kinetic redirection. I swear that was not my intention and I definitely want to add an arc to the object's movement later on. If anyone knows how the gravity gloves in Alyx are implemented, please let me know. This is it for this devlog. We now have a way to pick up items, directly or through Psyforce. We can store items in an inventory and we can take items out of the inventory. For the next devlog, I want to tackle shooting. See you then!